Hey there. Today we are talking about step 3 for preparing your students for the state tests. If you've been following along, hopefully you already have your roadmap printed out and you've caught up on videos 1 and 2 about integrating test prep into your regular lessons and also teaching them the strategies that are going to help them answer the multiple choice questions. Today, we are focusing on close reading, and it's one of my favorite steps in this process. If you're new here, welcome. You can go ahead and download the test prep toolkit down below the video. Make sure that you print out the roadmap. This is what we're working through right now. You can go back and watch the videos for step 1 and step 2. And today we are on step 3, teaching our students these close reading strategies. And I have to admit, it took me a while to realize the value of close reading. For my first years in 3rd grade, I didn't really know what close reading was, and I wasn't using it with my students nearly as much as I should have been. And now it is one of my absolute favorite parts in this test prep process because number 1, there are some ways to make it fun for your students. And number 2, it really does help them increase their understanding as they're reading. So this is going to help them on the state test, but more importantly, it's going to help them in their reading that they do every day of their life. So what is close reading? Close reading means that we're going to read a text more than one time. And each time we read it, it's going to be for a specific purpose, which is the important part. We don't want to have the students looking for everything every time that they read this text or the first time that they read it, because the first time students read, it's really just to get a basic understanding of the text. The second time they read, they can dig a little bit deeper and get a better understanding of what's happening. And then the third time, they're actually able to analyze it, really take what the writer said plus what they already know and make some inferences and get that really deep understanding of what is happening. So why is close reading beneficial? First of all, it definitely helps your students get a better understanding of what they're reading. Second of all, they get that deeper understanding of the text rather than just a surface level reading it one time and just having a basic understanding of it. They're digging much deeper through their close reading. Third, it's going to help them focus in on new vocabulary words that they don't know what they mean or that they don't understand. Taking the time to read it multiple times is going to help them get a better understanding of those vocabulary words. And they're also going to be able to put it in their own words, summarize what happened, and really just understand the text much better. And since we are talking about state tests, close reading is also going to help your students answer both the multiple choice questions on the state tests and the open-ended responses. Especially for those, being able to go back and find text evidence is so important, and close reading is going to help them do that. I have a freebie for you for close reading. It's called my Close Reading Guide, and it's going to give you everything you need to start teaching your students about close reading. So the first time your students read a text, they are going to be looking for the most important parts. And we have this Super Reading Symbols bookmark that's included in the freebie, and it just tells your students what to do their first time through reading. They're going to number the paragraphs. They're going to put stars next to any important information, check marks next to anything that makes sense to them. Anything that's confusing gets a question mark. Anything that's unknown word-wise, new vocabulary words, they're going to circle, and then they're going to put exclamation points next to anything that's really interesting to them in the passage. These marks are just going to get them thinking about the text their first time through, making sure that they can understand most of it, and seeing if they do have any questions. Were there any parts that were confusing that they then know they need to go back to and really focus on the second time through? Now, I mentioned close reading can be fun for your students, and that's because of some of the tools you can give them as they're doing their close reading. So for that first read through, I like to do some neat pens, anything that's fun, different for them that they don't get to use every day for writing. That's going to help them mark up the text, and they are really going to like using those pens. So you can see everything in blue here is what was done on that first read, numbering the paragraphs, using question marks and exclamation points. So that's just a fun way for them to be able to do their close reading. You can even make a close reading kit for your students where you give them everything that they would need for close reading, like those fun pens. We're going to talk about highlighters on another one of our reads, and even post-it notes. Students love using post-it notes. So these are just some fun things you can give them in a close reading kit to get them excited about this step. All right, the second read. This time they're going to read again, but they're going to dig deeper into the text. And since we're talking about test prep, this is also where I have my students look for the answers to multiple choice questions. Since they have that basic understanding from their first read, now they should be able to look in the text and find specific answers to these questions. So they're going to go back through, and just to make sure my students are going back into the text, I have them underline where they found the answer and also put the number of the question. So in the close reading freebie, you are getting passages to do with your students. There are two different passages. One is for you to model the close reading strategies for your students, and then the other one is for them to apply them independently. So you're going to do it first each step, and then they're going to do it themselves. So this is the praying mantises passage that you're going to use for your modeling. And you can see here that I underlined where this answer was found and, backwards, and put the number of the question that was answering. That's just a way to guarantee that your students really are going back into the passage, because a lot of times they're like, oh, I remember that. I read it and I know that this is the right answer. Making them prove it is the way to make sure that it really is the right answer. I can't tell you how many times my students were 100% sure their answer was correct until I made them go back into the passage and prove it to me, and then they figured out what the real answer should have been. All right, let's move on to step 3 of close reading. This is where we're analyzing, making inferences about the text, really having a deep understanding of what the text is about. And since we're talking about state test prep, this is where your students are going to do their open-ended responses. Since they've read the text twice already, being able to answer those open-ended response questions should be easier for them now. So in the freebie, you'll also have multiple choice questions for the second read for each passage. And then for day 3, for the third read, you have an open-ended response about both passages. So on this day, as the students are reading, this is where they get to use their highlighters, which is always very fun. Just make sure that you teach that we don't highlight everything in the text. That does not help us at all. I had students who loved doing that and just using their highlighter as much as possible. And then when they went back to answer the open-ended question, they had no idea what the important text evidence was because everything was highlighted. So we practiced using the highlighter in moderation and only highlighting the parts that are going to help you answer the question. So in this third read, they're going back through, and as they're reading, they're highlighting those important parts and then also making the inferences they need to make in order to answer the question completely. Included in the close reading guide freebie, there's also sample answers for both open-ended responses so that you can show your students what's expected, and then they can write their own and compare to what a good response would be. So that is how close reading is going to help you prepare your students for state testing. They may not be able to read the passages 3 times during the state test. Some of those passages are really, really long, and their stamina is not going to last quite that long. Here we're doing it over 3 separate days, not in one testing session. but close reading still helps them to focus in on the most important information. And they're getting those strategies for going back in the text and underlining, going back and highlighting so that they can find those important facts that they need to answer the multiple choice and the open-ended questions. So all of these strategies really are going to help them out when they get to the state tests. All right, next time we are talking about using sample passages and questions that are going to prepare the students for the tests. I will see you then. Bye.